Hello, my astrology family. This is Lada from astrolada.com. And with the approach of Valentine's Day, we're going to talk about Venus return charts and Mars return charts because they're also very important for your love life and relationships. And here to talk about Venus is our master Venus specialist, Donnie. If you've seen the previous interview we had with him, he blew our minds away with the Venus cycles. It probably had 50,000 views and people are still talking about it, that video. So I'm very excited to have another presentation from Donnie. Happy New Year, Donnie, Chinese New Year. You told me so, that it's today.
Yes, the Aquarius new moon will be falling onto the new Chinese Lunar New Year, and this year will be the metal ox. So if I were to correspond it to the Western zodiac, it will be a Capricorn-like year ahead. So
Ox.
we've been working very hard, so. But you know what? Capricorn, I think is really a sign that is about, if you work for it, it will really manifest and be tangible and it will be long lasting.
Absolutely, like the ox. You plow the field.
Yeah. So I think it will be, just if you have anything in mind, just go ahead and do it.
Mm-hmm.
And work very hard for it. I think 2021, we are blessed with this Venus-Jupiter conjunction.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to occur this new moon, as we welcome the Chinese Lunar New Year and also this Aquarian new moon. So, since it's conjunct in Aquarius, why not we just take a detached astrological and objective approach to enrich our knowledge about our relationships?
Yes.
and how we use like Venus and Mars return charts for checking like relationship development potentials. And included in that, there may be some periods whereby you can even contemplate about getting married or
Yes. Do you have a presentation for us, or do you want to share screen?
Yes. Okay, wondering if I can share.
Yeah.
Okay. So today we're talking about Venus and Mars return charts. Mm-hmm. And what's captured here is the synodic Mandela pattern that Mars and Venus actually create in the sky.
It is like a mandala.
Yeah, it is. It is very unique. Like when we talk about planetary pattern, the pattern that they create. So first, we'll talk about the Venus return first. Mm-hmm. Since I've seen a lot, I suppose I'm qualified to have my input on what I do see from the hundreds of Venus return charts I've seen so far.
And by the way, you're offering your most loved reading, you're offering it at a discount now, which is about your love life. It's about Venus. You cover Venus from all aspects with the Venus synodic cycle,
yes,
with the solar return charts. And it's we've had like such amazing feedback from your clients.
Thanks. I just want to say that this presentation is based on empirical data, and I've done enough research and also testing on charts to actually put the content into this presentation.
It's not just something you're repeating, it's something you discovered by looking at him.
Yeah, something I discovered along the way as well. So let's just start off with Venus return, but this time we're diving more in depth than the previous time we did so. So when we talk about Venus return, it's really about the snapshot of the sky when Venus actually returns to her natal position, and is valid for the period where the cycle is active. And so for a Venus return, it can last anywhere from 9.5 months approximately, all the way up to 13.5 months. Why is it the gap is so big? Because like for example, this year we've got Venus retrograde in Capricorn late this year.
Mm-hmm.
And so anyone that has a Venus return before December of 2021, that particular cycle in 2021, it will last for a year-ish, around 13 and a half months, because Venus will go retrograde in Capricorn and stay in the sign of Capricorn for a good 4 months in total. So Venus return is definitely one of the charts we look at if we want to review any potential for relationship developments, and also it can be also used for any considerations if you want to step into marriage. Because one of the meanings of Venus is really your approach to love, romance, pleasure, happiness, and relationships.
Mm-hmm.
So when is a Venus return noteworthy? I have looked at enough Venus return charts to know that when a planet in a Venus return actually conjunct a Venus return angle, particularly on the ascendant or on the midheaven or MC, or that a planet in the Venus return actually conjuncts your natal ascendant or MC. This will actually bring a lot of emphasis to the planet and what it represents. And if the planet is somehow tied to the seventh house, this means that the energy is projected, and it is via the attraction of another person into your life.
So if it's
and when it's somehow and when it's somehow and when it's somehow tied to the fourth house, right? I realize that that's when people move or buy a new house, for example.
Mm-hmm.
It can be an addition to the family. When I see, for example, Jupiter somehow tied to the fourth house, be it in the Venus return fourth house cusp,
Mm-hmm.
or conjunct the natal fourth house cusp, is actually it can be so I think I remember a client who's about to adopt a new kid, expand the family.
Yeah.
And that can happen via that.
Clarify to people, if you have Venus return from the Venus return chart that falls on an angle in your horoscope, natal one, it means that by birth, your Venus is already there. So your natal Venus is already in the seventh or the fourth. So it happens basically for those people. It will happen every time, isn't it? Every time.
It can, but I've seen cases where, in the Venus return chart itself, because the angles are different from the natal.
Yes. So more important will be where it falls in the Venus return chart, rather than in the natal. Because in the natal, it's always there, and every year it returns to the same position. Type of
but
thing.
somewhat it actually highlights that planet's meaning. For example, if we are talking about Jupiter in the Venus return chart.
Yes. Okay. Jupiter. Okay.
Yeah. If for example, Jupiter is conjunct the IC in the Venus return chart, I've seen
any planet, not just Venus.
Oh, no, not only that. Yeah. So I'll later on go into planetary pairings within the Venus return to actually explain to people what can it mean. So for example, I think there's a little misunderstanding. So for example, if we talk about Jupiter on the IC in the Venus return chart, it can mean adoption that's taking place or soon to be taking place. Or you could be trying to expand the family, welcoming your own child into the family. That can happen as well. If you're not doing that, it can be Jupiter on the IC in the Venus return chart can be somewhat like starting a new philosophical field of studies. It can also happen. Or moving to another country as well. I've seen that happen as well. And for example, if it's Venus return Uranus conjunct the IC, in the Venus return chart, it can mean somewhat of discovering new intense pleasure in activities. Maybe it's something that's out of your comfort zone, Uranus.
Mhm.
Like for example, you've been scared of like skydiving or like daredevil sports. And then somewhat in the Venus return chart, the Uranus actually conjunct the IC.
Mhm.
And in that Venus return, you're just like, what the heck? I'll just sign up and just go for skydiving.
Some kind of pleasurable activity that is Venusian, but with Uranian twist.
Yes. And very much that. And I've seen that particularly when Venus in a Venus return chart conjunct Mars, Jupiter, or Uranus, especially in the first and 10th house of the Venus return, it can bring like some kind of manifestation of events in which I'll touch on later. But these three planets bring the spice to the love life. And the third point is really about Venus return ascendant that's conjunct the natal ascendant, descendant, or the midheaven. This can really bring about some kind of manifestation because angles in a chart are really potent energetic points of manifestation. And so when the Venus return ascendant actually syncs up with one of your natal angles, particularly the ascendant, descendant, and MC, it can really bring about something tangible in terms of events. When the Venus return occurs on a new moon or a full moon, it is also important because new moon, that's when the sun and moon comes together. It's symbolic of new beginnings of some sorts. Whereas a full moon is actually about a culmination of past events. And if your Venus return actually occurs on a full moon, something has been boiling up and has shown you the maximum potential of whatever you're trying to see. And it's time for you to make that decision to move forward, whatever that may be. And this brings me to my next point. If a Venus return actually occurs very close to, I give it like a tolerance of plus or minus 3 days of a solar or lunar eclipse. This is even more potent because eclipses are like lunations on steroids.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah. So I have one of my Venus return. I went back into the archives to look at it. And I do have a Venus return a few years ago that's very close to a solar eclipse.
What
And indeed, a lot of things happen regarding to relationships. I won't say what it is.
Usually karmic relationships, eclipses are about something very
Yeah,
powerful, yeah.
because the nodes are involved as well, so there's definitely something that's very karmic in nature. And if the Venus return actually occurs like plus or minus a week away from your solar return, this can be really significant because this means that the position of Sun and Venus are replicated very closely to each other. Hence, their returns are so close by the transit sky. And so it's a very significant period also for Venus-related activities.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So these are the
generate them for people who don't have astrology software. Is there a place they can generate their Venus return?
They can generate it through AstroSeek. So if you just put into the Google search box like AstroSeek, Astro Seek, SEEK, one word, and then like a Venus return,
Okay.
they will be able to generate it there. And I think they cover all the planetary returns over there as well.
Well, that's what I'll
Yeah, so they can check it. I'm sure you'll be like curious to check yours. What's coming?
Thank you so much.
Okay, so let's see like Venus's aspects in the Venus return. So it does not mean that Venus need to be in aspect with particularly Mars. I'll touch on that why. In the Venus return to have relationship action occurring, although a Mars and Venus conjunction can mean your love life heating up. And if this somehow is tied into the return chart of the first and seventh house, fifth or 11th house, there's an indication that there will be some kind of romantic development. But if the 10th house is also somehow tied into the whole picture via rulerships, then it's even more like potent in a way. So I just want to touch on briefly about Venus's aspects to another Venus return planet, because this will kind of tie into the kind of, or the type of attraction and love that you will develop over this period. So I'll just go through this briefly because people can go back to this slide and just freeze it and just read at their own pace. So Mars and Venus context, particularly the conjunction, I find it very potent because we're talking about the natural polarity axis of Aries and Libra, and Taurus and Scorpio. And they are naturally in the natural zodiac sign, they are opposing each other. So we're talking about an axis in opposition, which is like an attraction kind of energy. So it's very, very important if you have that. The only thing that I want to touch on regarding Mars and Venus context is that if it's an opposition, Mars is slightly in retrograde motion. When Mars is opposing Venus in a Venus return chart. Because Venus is tied to the into the movement of the sun, and usually Mars goes retrograde when there's a Sun-Mars opposition. So when that happens, it can bring some kind of intensity, passion, and drama, but it's not necessarily of the pleasurable kind. And if in a Venus return chart you have Mars and Venus square, it can still bring the spice, don't get me wrong, but when it's a square, there can be kind of like a, either one party can be too pushy to get stuff going.
Yeah.
And if Venus and Jupiter makes a contact in the Venus return chart, this can be pretty good as well. It's one of the indicators that your love nature is expanded by Jupiter. However, if it's in heart aspect, you may just kind of overindulge in stuff in an unhealthy way. And last but not least, Venus-Jupiter aspects in the Venus return chart is not only restricted to relationships, but it's also legal matters as well.
Oh, legal. Okay.
Yeah, legal matters. I've actually seen Venus-Jupiter contacts when, in a Venus return chart, when someone is going to get divorced.
Maybe it feels like liberation for them.
It is. And especially in square and opposition aspects. Like I usually find that they're probably going to court to settle and free themselves from a relationship. So it is by itself a development, but this time is to free yourself from one. Venus Saturn. Okay, this one can be a bit of a Debbie Downer in energy, especially the conjunction. But I have also seen with when there's a Venus Saturn conjunction in the Venus return chart, it can bring a very committed kind of relationship that's coming your way. Mm-hmm. If you are not currently in a relationship yourself. And if it's somewhat tied to the 5th or 7th house, it can happen. But if it's a hard aspect like a square on an opposition, then it can usually lead to some kind of relationship stresses. It can even lead to separation of sorts, and either party can feel kind of lonely in this relationship if you are currently in one. So something spicy as well will be Venus and Uranus contacts. This can be somewhat of an exciting one because we're talking about Uranian kind of relationships. So I've seen it happen for people who experienced like a magnetic little crush on someone else? You know, you just see someone and you're enamored by them and you're just like, oh, so drawn to them, but it's just a little crush. You know, I just tell them that love might not be reciprocated, and um, and especially with the conjunction, that means transit Uranus is passing over your Venus for some time. Hence, it appears in your Venus return chart. This can initiate some kind of abrupt change. So change can be good or bad because, you know, because we're talking about Uranus, which is the wild card of the planetary system, archetypally wise. And Uranus is also a very independent planet. So when it's combined with Venus in aspect, it does not guarantee staying power for sure. And there's a likelihood that it may be short-lived, whatever the situation is.
But it's
That is
very
subjected to change.
very likely this someone that appears in your life is there to bring a change to what you find attractive if you are stagnant in a pattern, what you find desirable, to change those Venus values in your life. So they don't necessarily.
It's almost like there's a decluttering and the rut. If you've been in a rut with what your Venus is displaying. I mean, right now we have Uranus and Taurus. So I've seen that if someone has got a fixed sign Venus,
Yeah.
and Uranus is also in a fixed sign, squaring it or opposing it, it can bring the spice in terms of like maybe it's time for a change for that as well. And when we have a Venus and Uranus contact, I find this one very good for artistic pursuits. And if you are inclining to do some kind of mystical studies or even going to like meditative practices, it would be great for that.
Wait. I have to stop you here. The year
right.
I met my husband and married him, I had Venus return conjunct Uranus. And that's the year I also divorced. So it brought a huge change, but it stayed in my life. So it's not always just a crash, just to tell you. But Venus and Uranus had only trines from Mars, Saturn, and Moon. So
okay,
very well aspected, but Venus was conjunct Uranus. So I met someone totally different, the other end of the world. So yeah, I totally changed. I've never before liked this type of guy, younger, attractive, you know. So it really changes what you like in relationships. So that's very right on. But if there are good aspects to this Venus Uranus, you can have a more lasting, you know, relationship. So
well, I suppose that you said it best with your example because like to Matthew, your husband right now, you are very Uranian. You know, you are Aquarius rising, Uranus ruled. Okay. He probably hasn't dated anyone like you at all.
No.
Exactly. So like, and Uranus is also the planet of like being alien-like.
Yes, absolutely.
So at least to him, you feel like kind of alien, like, oof, like I wonder if I should, you know, but then with that Uranian energy is also like exciting because you're delving into the unknown.
I still feel butterflies around him from time to time.
Yeah.
So yeah. So anyway, let's see how
it's almost electric. Yeah, I mean like Uranus rules lightning, so it's like that lightning bolt just hit
like
you.
a lightning. I felt like a lightning struck me. That's exactly. I was out of breath. It's and it's so fast.
The way it actually started is like a crush.
Oh yeah, it started like a crush, but it moved into marriage within 3 months. So
that's how Uranian this thing is. It's very fast.
Yes, very fast.
So the situation is slightly short-lived, as in like the phases of, you know, it's almost like time is not linear when we talk about Venus, Uranus, and things just progress super fast and it can go either way. Yeah.
Wow, look at that. Next year on my Venus return 2017 was again Venus conjunct Uranus. but in
Right.
the fourth house, and I had a baby, and it was sudden pregnancy. So, like you
Yeah,
said,
fourth house. Yeah.
yeah, so
Addition to the
it's
family.
very unexpected. Okay, stop interrupting you. Carry on. It's fascinating.
Yeah, so the next one will be Venus Neptune context, and it'd be very good if you want to do some esoteric or like mystical kind of pursuits or even artistic pursuits. Like some people may want to start art therapy to self-help themselves when they have a Venus Neptune contact in their Venus return chart. Um, I have found that the Venus Neptune contact or aspecting each other in the Venus return chart not exactly the greatest for relationship, because there can be some kind of a veil or delusion, even if it's a soft aspect. But with the hard aspect in particular, there can be a lot of um, unrequited love. There can be just only a one-sided love, or it can be a love that's filled with disappointments of some sorts. But however, if it's very well aspected, like if natally Venus in the natal chart is very well aspected, there's no hard aspects. And in the Venus return chart, Venus and Neptune forms a soft aspect and somewhat ties into the Venus return fifth house or seventh house. It can be a fairy tale romance. Yeah. Venus Pluto. Okay, this one can be very hard to extract yourself from, because Venus Pluto, it brings on the entanglement issue, be it energetically or psychically. And there's a almost like a karmic feeling as well when you meet a person, if you have like Venus Pluto aspect in the Venus return chart. However, I've seen also if Venus and Pluto are in hard aspect in the Venus return chart, it can lead to some kind of codependent behavior as well that's unhealthy. Particularly with the square, I've seen powerful beginnings and yet powerful endings to a relationship or partnership as well. And sometimes, unfortunately, it can also mean or imply that it can be the death of a loved one when I see the square or opposition coming forth. And Venus Chiron. Chiron, that's CH here. When I see Venus Chiron in soft aspects like a trine or sextile, it can be great to work on your self-worth issues if you've been hurt in the past. If you've been telling yourself that you're not worthy of relationship and you've been kind of functioning like a doormat in your relationship sphere, this can be great in terms of a period to work through those issues. You can engage a therapist, a counselor, because those are very chironic occupations to look through those issues. But however, I've seen Venus Chiron in hard aspects. In a Venus return chart, there's a potential to attract someone who's very wounded. When I say wounded, it can be physically wounded, emotionally and psychologically wounded, or you can even experience some kind of wound or pain throughout the relationship as well. And last but not least, Venus and the asteroid series. If I see that in tight aspect, especially in conjunction, I've basically went back to look at my archives of charts in my astrology software. I focus on Bill Clinton. What actually came up in his Venus return in 1995 when he got into Lewinsky.
Yes.
And that year, he's got Venus and Ceres conjunct very tightly in his Venus return when he actually started the affair with Monica Lewinsky. And I've actually asked myself why. And I just came to the conclusion because Ceres is an asteroid of fertility and nurturing. So, and it has the energy of Mars and Jupiter when we talk about series. So when it's intermingled with Venus, it actually somewhat expands that. There's the Jupiter portion of series.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Mars portion of series actually brings in the sexual tendencies. And so it's no wonder that, back in 1995, that Venus return does indicate that, oh, by the way, that conjunction is in his Venus return fifth house of romance. So he started an extramarital affair with Monica that year. Yeah. There's just more receptivity to younger females, which is Monica in this case.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I find it very fascinating. So people can come back to this slide and see, like, um, what planets are connected to Venus in the Venus return chart for them. Okay, let's see a celebrity example. Since I've used Giselle Bundchen's photo in my Venus launch video, we shall see what's going on in her husband's Venus return when they got married. And this happened in late February of 2009. So on the right will be Tom Brady's Venus return chart, and on the left, it will be his natal chart. So I've put it side by side to see what is going on in Tom's Venus return chart when they got married, or are there any indications of marriage potentials to take it to that level. And first and foremost, I've basically spotted that there's a cluster of things in the Venus return 7th house, and that includes the South Node, Mars. So it's an angular Mars in a Venus return. And also the part of spirit, which is an Arabic point that talks about social status change. So when the part of spirit falls into the Venus return 7th house of marriage, which means that there can be social status change because of a committed partnership, for that matter. And Mars and part of spirit are conjunct together with Saturn that's close by. And Mars in the Venus return chart rules the 9th house of holy matrimony. And this is one of the house, or this is the house that I look at if there's a potential like for someone to consider getting married.
It's
So if I were to put all these things together.
so you look at the 9th as marriage, isn't it? That's also what Vedic.
Yeah.
The 7th is relationships and how
Yeah.
the relationship dynamics and describes the partner, but the 9th is you committing on a path of fidelity and something higher than you, and that's sacred marriage type.
Yeah, and also I want to bring to the audience's attention is that when we talk about first marriage partner is the 7th house, second marriage partner is the 9th house, and third marriage partner is the 11th house. And I've seen the discussion board going on saying that, oh, because they are the siblings to each other. Actually, it's not the case. There's actually a more in-depth picture to that. So the first marriage partner will be the 7th house. And when you get divorced from the first marriage partner, you count 9 houses away from the 7th. You officialize it. That's also the meaning of the 9th house. So you count 9 houses away from the 7th, you get the 3rd house.
Okay.
So if you're single from the first husband, it's the 3rd house. And if you get married the second time, it's the 7 houses away from the 3rd. So you get the 9th house.
Oh, all right. So it's not like the sibling. Good.
Oh, no. Not. And then if you get divorced from...
It never made sense to me is the sibling of the previous husband, but that makes more sense. Okay.
And if you get
astrology, the second marriage partner is the 8th from the 7th, because it's like death and rebirth of the first spouse into a different one.
Okay, because I usually derive it through like 9 houses away, then 7 house if you get married away.
And
So,
then
for example, if you get divorced from the second husband, is 9 houses away from the ninth,
which is the fifth.
which is the fifth. And then if you get hitched with your third husband, is the seventh from the fifth, which is the 11th, and so on and so forth.
So the divorce is the fifth, or who you are after the first marriage. You single.
Okay, like if you get divorced from a partner, you count 9 houses away.
Okay, and what does this ninth house from the first?
Because the ninth house means it's something to officialize something.
Okay, and that
It's
will
got to go through.
you single or what?
Yeah. So for example, like I've seen. That's why I ask usually to my clients if they want to sign up with my Venus reading. Like, if, for example, if they've married multiple times, they have to indicate to me like how many committed partnerships. Because right now, like relationships are so gray in a way. You don't need to. Some actually didn't sign the paper and they're like stay together for a long time.
Yeah.
And I still count that as a marriage partner of sorts.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So like if yeah. I mean, you gotta evolve with the times, right? Like our definition of committed partnership in this case, and the astrology has to fit that. So like that's why the third husband is the seventh from the fifth, so it's the 11th house. And if you get divorced from the third husband, is you count 9 houses away from the 11. This is how you get the 7th house. Yeah.
And then your fourth marriage becomes the first house.
Yes, because it's seven from the 7th. Yeah.
No fourth marriage for me. I have South Node there. Thanks God. Sorry to interrupt. Carry on. This is fascinating, Donia. I totally love what you're teaching.
Yeah. So so the first and foremost in Tom Brady's chart will be like that angular 7th house Mars, which gives it that extra action, the extra decision to officialize or legalize that committed partnership in terms of marriage. Also, if I were to go back to Mars and part of spirit, that's conjunct in the 7th house in the Venus return, is ruled by the Sun. And Sun is in the 5th house in the Venus return chart. It's a marriage that stems from being in love because you got Sun and Venus together. So that brings the love component into it. And we have Sun and Venus opposing the Moon in the sign of Capricorn. So this already tells me that over this period, Tom is marrying someone that's married to a woman that's like a boss, Capricorn. And we all know that Giselle is really at the top of her game. That's very Capricorn energy. And Moon is quite close by to conjunct Pluto. So she is very influential. She is also a foreigner because we've got Pluto in the sign of Sagittarius or foreigners. So she's a very powerful, a boss on top of her game, who's Brazilian by nationality. And we also have Venus return North Node, Ascendant, and Neptune. That's very like, that's clustered very close to the first house, to the Ascendant to be precise. And when I see the nodes are tied to the Venus return Ascendant Descendant axis, usually it tells me that positive directions in terms of relationship will be manifesting over the active Venus return period. And since Neptune is also here, it can be very much like a fairy tale kind of quality to it. And since the Venus return ascendant is in the very quick and lightning fast sign of Aquarius. They actually gotten married 1 month after they got engaged.
Oh,
So you can see how fast how symbolic this Aquarius rising in the Venus return chart actually resembles their the speed in which they move. Yeah. I've also seen that if someone that has the Aries rising and the nodes are somewhat involved in that as well, the relationship can move super fast as well. Yeah.
that's in the solar return chart.
That's in the Venus return.
Sorry, Venus. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, Venus return. Yeah. And but however, Tom has North Node conjunct the ascendant, which means there's a focus on the self, and South Node in this on conjunct the descendant, the seventh house. This can have a double-edged sword kind of meaning, because I've also seen that yes, positive action in relationship can be taken over this Venus return period, but also that someone might be left behind because he probably has gotten to a stage where this person's no good for me and I need to leave. And he did leave someone to marry Giselle over
Oh,
this period.
wow. Amazing.
Yeah, so but they are no longer together. But then the ex-girlfriend of Tom Brady was already pregnant. Yeah.
What? I didn't know that.
Yeah, was already pregnant when. So there's actually a bun in the oven from another woman when he married Giselle back in 2009 February.
Well, that Mars on his seventh house cusp in the Venus return, obviously he had the hots for her.
And Giselle, and I think Giselle is the first wife, so it's very symbolic of the seventh house energy. And if you think about it, Mars is very sporty, and Giselle has got a very sporty. I mean, she used to play volleyball before she got into modeling.
Yes,
so
shows models. Mars is physical and
yeah. And in Leo, with the big hair.
Yes.
With a big Brazilian hair. And now, last but not least, we've got that cluster of ascendant Chiron and Neptune falling onto the natal fifth house cusp, pretty close. And this actually tells me that through this union with Giselle, Tom has received some kind of healing in his ability to express love, affection, and joy in the process. Maybe Giselle is, like keep nudging him to kind of like, come on, show me you love me, And in that, it can help him resolve all pains and hurts because there's Chiron involved as well in terms of his past relationships. But you can also talk about when I see Venus return Chiron and ascendant conjunct, somewhat falling into the fifth house of in the natal, it can also talk about somewhat of a high expectations, some form of restlessness, but also optimism too, in this love union. And when it's in a sign of Aquarius, probably he's also anticipating some kind of social status jump because Aquarius is about that social status, elevation, and it's dramatic in nature. Because right now you have Tom Brady and Giselle Bündchen, who's a power couple. And they are known like worldwide. And so it's very much fitting to the Aquarius energy.
Yeah, Aquarius is opportunistic, social climber.
Yeah. And we're talking about the energy of this chart, which is the Venus return. So it's got to channel through the Venus energy because we're tracking Venus returning to the natal position. So, what is the main takeaway I want people to get when we talk about Venus return? Each Venus return actually represents a segment or a portion of a series of lessons that we need to learn before that harmony with life, which is Venus, can ultimately manifest in our life. So in a sense, Venus need is unfolding cycles through through its return cycles in order to slowly and be gradually birthed and awakened within us. And as we all know, Venus returns are not all the time pleasant. And sometimes we got to go through struggles. For example, like we have to lose love to find it in someone else. But we need to go through that process in our evolution, in the sense that sometimes we just need to go through that dark night of the soul, which is also Venus's domain, by the way, especially when she goes invisible. Before we can fully awaken and realize what is love in its true essence as part of your life as you evolve along the way. I think the most important thing here I want to stress is that the Venus return, the higher meaning of it is really looking into your Venus return chart and realize that love is ultimately the guiding light, and how you actually embody your Venus and develop that Venusian energies within you it depends how much you can perceive, feel, and let her be with you on every level in terms of the essence of you. Yeah, I think that's what I want to mention here to bring the Jupiter energy into this. So let's talk about the Mars return and bring it into the picture as well. Because as we know, in the natural zodiac wheel, a Mars root sign is always opposite a Venus root sign. And we have two axes regarding that, which is like Aries and Libra, and Taurus and Scorpio. So initially, when people get to know about the Venus return, you're like, oh, if I want to look at relationship potentials, I'll just look exclusively into the Venus return. I actually said, no, you have to look at the Mars return as well and look at it together. Because Mars is also the archetype, of achievement and action, and it's the sacred masculine, and really talks about, yes, you may desire something, but do you want to go out there and do it and claim it as your own? I'm sure, Lada, with your Aries stellium, you know what I'm talking about. You have to really stand your ground and really make it known your intention in order to solidify what you really want, And so if we talk about unfoldment in terms of action in relationships, we have actually seen in Tom Brady's case that he's got an angular Mars in the 7th house in the Venus return. And that's an indication of there's some significant developments over there. So the converse can be true. If you have Venus falling into the 7th house in the Mars return, it can also mean some kind of prominent relationship development as well. Last but not least, when I see a Mars and Venus conjunction, very spicy, very passionate, your relationship sphere is going to heat up a lot. This can also occur when there's a soft aspect between Mars and Venus, like a sextile or a trine, not so much as the square and opposition. And this can be in the Mars return or Venus return charts. So both would have to be checked. And if Mars and Venus are somehow linked and is somewhat tied to the 5th and 11th house, and or the ascendant descendant axis, and somewhat the 10th house is put into the picture via aspects or somewhat regarding that, it can be very telling that there will be some kind of developments in that sphere. Also, when the ninth house, as we've seen from Tom Brady's chart, because Mars that's angular in the seventh house in the Venus return chart rules Scorpio, which is the ninth, is also an auspicious time to consider marriage as well. So let's revisit Tom Brady's active Mars return in February of 2009 when he got married. So natally, on the left side of the chart, you can see that he already has a Libra rising. So it's a very Venusian chart that he has. And the ruler, natally, Venus, is in the ninth house of holy matrimony. And it's conjunct Jupiter, which means that he's likely to marry a foreigner already. That's indicated as part of his natal potential. And his natal Venus is at 1 degree of Cancer, which is falling into the Mars return descendant close to exact. So there's already an indication that over this Mars return period, which lasts around 2 years, Mars return usually is about 2 years, two and a bit more. You can see how Venus is highlighted here, and it's in the seventh, and the natal Venus is falling into the Mars return seventh house. So there's already a desire to get married to a foreigner. And the Mars return descendant is ruled by the moon. So we need to check the moon in the Mars return chart. And the moon is at 0 degrees, which is new beginnings. Is the overarching theme of new beginnings, and is in a very lightning fast and quick sign of Aquarius. So they got married really fast. And this is kind of like, it double confirms it from the Venus return perspective of where he's going with this. And moon in Aquarius in the first house of self and action is opposing part of spirit in the sign of children, Leo. So maybe an additional information here is that he wants to get married fast because he wants to have children quickly with Giselle. And true enough, I think their first child was born later that year in like December 2009. Also, you have Mars return Venus over here in the 8th house that's very tightly opposing Neptune. So there's something like a fairy tale glamour that surrounds this union. I've actually gone one step further and note that because we're talking about a Mars return, so Mars is our focus here, and Mars is in a sign of Gemini, which is Mercury ruled. And if we look at Mercury's position over here, and we look at the natal Mercury, he has just gone through a Mercury return. Because in a Mars return, Mercury is at 12 degrees of Virgo, and natally he's got it at 8 degrees. So he just started a Mercury return. So I actually checked his Mercury return chart that's active for this period as well. And it really triple confirms that he's going to enter into a union, because his Mercury return that's active over this time, it has a Mercury, Saturn, and Venus conjunction stellium. So Mercury is decision, Saturn is to commit, Venus is to commit to love and marriage. Also, in the Mercury return that's not shown here, he's also got a Mars and Uranus opposition. So this can show somewhat of a very fast decision in action. And also in the Mercury return, he has a Sun Neptune opposition as well. So if you add all these components together, this confirms an ultra quick, serious decision to commit to this mate in heaven, glamour-filled union to Giselle. So now let's just shift gears to Prince William and Kate Middleton, because I find it very interesting. They are just born 6 months apart, and their Mars are conjunct each other. Both have Mars in Libra. So Kate is the one that's born, that's 6 months older than Prince William. And so she's born with Mars right before it goes retrograde. And Prince William's born when Mars station retrograde. So since Kate doesn't have an accurate time of birth, let's look at the Mars return of Prince William. That's active in April of 2011 when he got married to Kate. So the chart here is the Mars return chart of Prince William that's active in April of 2011. And as you can see, there's like a cluster of planets in the 7th of the Mars return, the 1st in the Mars return, and the 10th in the Mars return. So these are all angular houses, and those are very potent in terms of manifestation of something important that's about to come. And all the planets there are all in cardinal signs, which adds to the angular house energy. Because if we combine the cardinal sign and also the angular house, it has very much of an initiating and reactiveness in terms of his actions to circumstances, to actually jump into new developments and situations. So if we were to look at the 7th house of committed partnership and the Mars return for Prince William, you can see Mars and Venus conjunction, which is very telling. And Mars and Venus conjunction in the 7th house, Venus actually rules the 7th house in the Mars return, and Mars actually rules the ascendant in the Mars return. So this is really like, a very strong smell that he might get married over this period. And what do we have? You also have Saturn that's pretty close to conjunct the 7th house, and Saturn actually rules the 10th house, or the MC of the Mars return. Also, you can see there's like a astrological T-square that's going on with all these planets here in Libra, opposing Jupiter in Aries, that's very close to the Mars return ascendant, all squaring Pluto on the midheaven of the Mars return. And Jupiter, not surprisingly, rules the 9th house of holy matrimony. And Jupiter actually conjuncts this particular Arabic part. I call it POM here for short, but it's actually, the full term is called part of marriage. And the part of marriage is calculated via the ascendant, descendant, and Venus. So it's got these 3 components. And Jupiter, which is the 9th house ruler, conjuncts that point. So there's even like a stronger indication that he might get married over this Mars return period. And last but not least, since all the planets along the relationship axis are squaring the 8th house ruler, Pluto, the purpose of this marriage is to really, or the intention, the underlying intention and motivation behind this marriage is to continue the monarchy's legacy, which is the 8th house, via marriage, and to produce offsprings. So it's fascinating how this ties in so nicely. So what I want to tell people is that besides the Venus return, you have to also check the Mars return as well for any relationship development opportunities. One more thing I want to tell the audience is that when the Venus return and the Mars return actually occurs very tightly together, as in if they're like plus or minus 7 days apart, this can really bring about some kind of relationship manifestation as well, because it's a very synchronized return and that doesn't happen often. Also, if you have the Venus return or the Mars return having repeated angles, so to speak, this can be very powerful energetic points of manifestation, which can bring events as well. And last but not least, I think I've repeated like twice already in this presentation that if somewhat the 5th and 11th and or the ascendant descendant axis is brought into the picture, just like for Prince William's case, because Mars and Venus conjunction actually rules the 1st and 7th house in the Mars return for him, it brought about a marriage. This can also happen when there's a 5th and 11th house by rulership activation as well. And if somewhat the 10th house is also pulled into the picture via aspects and all that, this can really bring about some kind of potent possibilities. And if the 9th house is put into the picture, because 9th house is the house of holy matrimony, it's also an auspicious period to consider the option of marriage.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Donnie. You gave us so much information.
Do you want to look at mine? Because I did I did use my own Mars and Venus return to teach the audience.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. So this is my Mars and Venus return. So I'm predicting my own relationship development. So probably the hardest one. For myself, what's coming for me in 2021, on the left will be the Venus return, on the right is the Mars return, and you can see the ascendant, they are repeated in the same sign, and also very close in degree as well. So all 4 angles in the Mars and Venus return are overlapping or is intertwined. And by the way, the angles of my natal chart are also falling into these 4 signs around those degrees as well. So,
oh wow,
triple manifestation.
Or wishful thinking.
Or wishful thinking, maybe. You know, gotta joke about it. You know what I mean? So maybe I'm predicting my own future.
I always see the worst for myself, so I stopped. My husband says, "I don't want to." Like, baby, I might die next year. Oh, baby, in your horoscope shows I might die next year. So I'm like, I'm no longer.
Well, I don't take myself too seriously. I think you know this by now. So it's like, you know, sometimes you gotta piss at yourself to get a laugh, you know. And in the Mars return, I've got Mars and Venus conjunction. Pretty close. So that's an indication. And the angles itself, I think, is very telling. So that's why I put it as one of the things to look for as well. If Mars and Venus return has intertwined angles, this is very important. So this kind of illustrates my one of the conclusion points I just made. Yeah, and then I just went on, you know, typical Virgo style and just delineated everything. So if the audience is actually interested in reading my business, so please do. But otherwise, this will be the end of my presentation. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Donnie. I learned so much walking around.